Hello everyone, it is me, Mr. Bates, coming to you from my house. This is a philosophy class sponsored by Squarespace. I hope you can endure the next 10 minutes of me being cringy as hell and explain to you in a slightly mumbled British accent, but I'll try and be as clear as possible and get through this. Okay, so hopefully by now you've done the first week's tasks and you have uploaded them to Classroom. If you have not done so, do it now. And I'm going to go over those slides from last week, go over the stuff we talked about, and introduce what we're going to do for the next few weeks, if this continues. Okay, so let's crack on. Hopefully, by now, you have all watched this video and considered what is meant by the term the greater good. Now, the term the greater good is often something thrown about by people who are doing bad things and they think they're doing it for a good reason. A very simple example might be someone who robs a bank in order to give money to the poor. Okay, some people get upset, some people lose some money, but in the long run, perhaps you're making more people happier and secure by stealing that money. In the video, what we see is a group of people who kill people in order to win a gardening contest, or for what they consider to be the greater good. Okay, hopefully the link with morality is clear. People sometimes do things that we consider to be terrible in order to do good things. Sometimes they do terrible things in order to say what they think is good, but in fact is still pretty bad. I will not go into question 3 because that is what you are going to do this week in a lot more detail. Okay, so you may have also watched the videos from HBO's cracking series, Chernobyl. Okay, and in this scene, in this program, in this real-life historical event, what happened was basically Russia didn't bother spending enough money or doing enough research in how nuclear power worked, and as a result, they created a massive reactor explosion, killing thousands and affecting future generations to come through things like mutations and cancer. So, in what way could this possibly be for the greater good? Well, there's a few things. Firstly, by knowing what happened in Chernobyl and being able to understand what went wrong, we can understand how not to do it again and how to ensure safer nuclear reactions and nuclear power in the future. Okay, great, but what's so great about nuclear power anyway? Well, if we can nail nuclear power, we don't have to rely so heavily on fossil fuels. And if we think about all the people that might be saved or might be given happiness, given a future by prolonging the planet's life and making it healthy, then we could argue that this nailing nuclear power is for the greater good. Okay, what about the people who were affected? Well, if we can understand how radiation poisoning works and how we can treat people with radiation poisoning, if this ever, God forbid, happens again, like it has done actually, then we know how to make those people healthy, or at least try and alleviate their suffering in the future. Which brings me to the case of Hisashi Ouchi, who has a pretty ironic name, I know, but let's try and not dwell on that. So maybe you watched the images in the video and you saw the terrible condition that Hisashi Ouchi was left in. Basically, his skin, his organs, his DNA melted as a result of a nuclear power reaction, an explosion, and what the scientists in Japan did was keep him alive as long as possible in order to be able to understand radiation poisoning, okay, and how we can treat it. So, the question you have to ask yourself, and which we asked you to consider, was all that pain and was all that suffering justified in order to make us have cleaner, safer nuclear power and in order to be able to treat people better? It seems, when you really look at it on a person-by-person basis, horrible to think like that, right? This man clearly was in a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. He begged people to let him die, and yet they kept him alive for the greater good. So these are basically the questions you have to weigh up. Was the suffering of one person bad enough for us not to do the thing that create a lot of good, a lot of happiness for a lot of people. And this is basically the central premise, the central idea behind a theory known as utilitarianism. Okay, now before we go a little bit more into utilitarianism, before you research it this week, we are going to discuss what you actually need to do. So I'm just going to read through this slide for maximum clarity. You will create a new Google document that evaluates one historical example of someone acting for the greater good. And this will be from the point of view of utilitarianism, a moral theory, which you'll explore this week. You're going to upload this document once a week, and we will add to it in future weeks if it continues. And you need to make sure you have a copy of that document so that when you upload it, you don't lose it. So you're just going to add to this document periodically and upload it periodically too. And this week there are two tasks. The first task is going to be based on a historical case that your teacher is going to assign to you via Classroom. I'd like to read it, and I'd like to summarize that thing in your own words, doing any extra research that you deem necessary to help you to understand. And the first section of your document will be an explanation of your case and the dilemma it poses. And I want that to be in your own words, okay? No copying and pasting. The second task will be to look at Jeremy Bentham and learn about his principle of utility. Utility is an interesting word and should be fairly easy for you guys to understand because the Spanish word for useful is útil, right? So, principle of utility is basically the principle of usefulness, okay? And what usefulness is for Bentham, we will look at this week. So, you're going to look at some slides, and on the same document, you're going to answer the questions here. What are mankind's sovereign masters? What does Bentham say about how we should measure right and wrong? And then I want you to explain in your own words what is meant by the principle of utility and explain how it might apply to your historical case. Okay, I've put a link here for instructions about what to do. They're basically very similar to what's on the slide, but it will show you also where we're going in the following weeks. Okay, and all I want you to do this week is focus on the stuff that is in yellow. Okay? And I've just realized there is a mistake here, which I'm going to delete, and I'm going to replace it. We're going to evaluate these cases, against the bad thing that was done in order to achieve the good thing. You might ask me, why am I correcting errors in a video? That's because this is the fourth time I've tried to record the video and I cannot be bothered to do it again. Okay, so next slide. You will be assigned one of the historical cases on this link here. So we're going to click on the link, and there are 10. So your teacher will assign you one of those 10. Okay, and at the top of each one, it will say the good thing that was done and the bad thing that was done in order to be able to reach that good thing. Okay, so for example, Edward Jenner managed to create a vaccine that eradicated smallpox. And the bad thing he did was performing experiments on children and babies in order to test the vaccine. Okay, very appropriate for these days. Hopefully, no children and babies are being practiced on to create a vaccine for coronavirus, but you never know. Maybe it's for the greater good. Don't quote me on that. Okay, so there are 10 there. Your teacher will assign you one. You need to read through all of them and then summarize it in your own words. Okay, that's your first task. If you feel like you need to do any research to make that easier for you and to understand it in greater detail, that is absolutely fine. Not going to hold you back. So the task we're going to do over the next few weeks is to look at this case from a couple of different points of view, okay, namely Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. And in the end, you're going to evaluate whether that action was justified based on the outcome and the way we had to get there, okay? What was done in order to achieve that outcome. All right, so you're going to find out about Jeremy Bentham. There are two links here. One of them is on Jeremy Bentham's mummified head, and the other one is here, okay? This is kind of just an interesting article about Jeremy Bentham, because Jeremy Bentham was pretty weird. He was pretty obsessed with having his body mummified after he died, and they used to wheel out his mummified body for dinner parties, and he used to carry those glass eyes you see around with him all the time. Okay, so watch the video that's created by clicking on the head. It is perhaps the cringiest video I've ever seen, more so than this one. And also click on that link just to find out a little bit more about Jeremy Bentham. Okay, just a bit of background. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to read through some extracts from Bentham's work. Okay, we don't often ask you to read legit philosophy, but we're going to ask you to do it at the moment. Okay, there are extracts and there's not much, and you're going to use the text to answer the questions here. What are mankind's sovereign masters? What does Bentham say about how we should measure right and wrong? And then you will need to summarize what Bentham means by the principle of utility and summarize that. Okay, so that is all on the documents you get to by reading the extracts, which are here. And if you're really struggling, you don't know what's going on, focus on the bits that are in bold. Okay, so those bits in bold will help you answer the questions. The principle of utility is in the final paragraph, but it's not that clear. Okay, you might have to use some inference. And if you have to Google it and find out a little bit more, that's fine, okay? But all the information you need to be able to answer those questions and to summarize it in your own words is on this document, okay? And then remember, you need to explain briefly how that might apply to your historical case, okay? So how might the principle of utility apply to your historical case, okay? So there we are, Jeremy Bentham and Utilitarianism. And that's all of the slides you need to work through this week, okay? So, just to summarize, your teacher is going to give you a historical case. They're going to assign it to you via Classroom, okay? There'll be a list of names, and next to that list of names will be your historical case. So you need to find out what your historical case is, read it, summarize it on one document. And then on that same document, you're going to answer those 3 questions about Jeremy Bentham. Okay? What are mankind's sovereign masters? What does he say about something that I've forgotten that is on the slideshow? And also summarizing his principle of utility and explaining what that means in relation to your historical case. Okay? All of these resources, all of these instructions will also be on a post on Classroom, okay? So don't feel like you have to watch all this video, too late. But look through the slides at your own pace. Use the question document we posted on Classroom, okay? If you have any concerns, if you have any doubts about what you're doing, how you're doing it, the philosophy behind it, whatever, okay? That's checked every single day. And by next Friday, the date will be something in the future. I cannot remember. Okay, but the date will be posted on Classroom, and you upload the first part of your document there. Okay, with all the tasks from this week. Have a non-coronary day, everyone. Ciao.